Unho stared at his computer screen, the blue light making his tired eyes water. It was almost 2 a.m., but sleep felt impossible. His small apartment in Seoul was too quiet, too empty. The silence reminded him of everything he'd lost. 3 months. Sago Minji had packed her bags and left. "You care more about your computer than me," she'd said, tears streaming down her face. Maybe she was right. As a software developer, Junho spent most of his time alone, writing code and fixing bugs. Working from home had made things worse. Days would pass without him talking to another human being. Tonight was one of those nights when the loneliness felt like a heavy weight on his chest. He'd already watched 3 movies, eaten instant noodles for dinner, and finished all his work for tomorrow. Now he found himself browsing strange websites, looking for something to fill the emptiness. The online marketplace he'd stumbled upon looked suspicious. Most of the text was in broken English, and the website design looked like it was made 10 years ago. But Junho kept scrolling anyway, clicking through pages of random electronics and weird gadgets he'd never seen before. That's when he saw it. A listing that made him stop scrolling and lean closer to his screen. Advanced AI companion pet, perfect for lonely people. The price was shockingly low, too low actually. Junho had been following AI technology for years, and he knew that real AI companions cost thousands of dollars. This one was priced like a cheap toy. The photos were blurry and dark, showing what looked like some kind of small figure in a box. The seller's profile had no reviews, no history, and a username that was just random numbers and letters. Every logical part of Junho's brain was screaming that this was a scam. But his heart was louder than his brain tonight. He imagined coming home to something that would greet him, something that might make conversation, or at least make some noise in his silent apartment. Even if it was just a simple robot pet, it would be better than the crushing quiet that surrounded him every day. Junho's finger hovered over the Buy Now button. He thought about Minji again, about how she used to fill their apartment with laughter and music. He thought about his co-workers who had families to go home to, while he had nothing but empty rooms and the glow of his computer screen. "This is stupid," he whispered to himself. But he clicked the button anyway. The payment went through instantly. No confirmation email, no tracking number, just a simple message saying, "Your order will arrive soon." Junho immediately regretted his decision. He tried to contact the seller, but there was no way to reach them. The website didn't even have a customer service page. For the next 3 days, Junho checked his phone constantly, expecting to see a message from his bank about fraudulent charges. He told himself he'd been scammed and tried to forget about it, but part of him still hoped that maybe, just maybe, something would actually arrive. On the 4th day, someone knocked on his door. Junho wasn't expecting any deliveries. When he opened it, he found a delivery man struggling with an enormous wooden crate that looked like it belonged in a warehouse, not at someone's front door. "Kim Junho?" the man asked, sweating from the effort of carrying the heavy box. Junho nodded, too surprised to speak. The crate was much bigger than he'd expected. Whatever was inside, it definitely wasn't a small robot pet. After the delivery, man left. Junho stared at the mysterious crate sitting in his living room, wondering what he'd gotten himself into. Junho's hands shook as he pried open the wooden crate with a screwdriver. The wood creaked and splintered, revealing layers of strange padding that felt like nothing he'd ever touched before. His heart pounded as he peeled back the final layer, expecting to find some kind of robotic animal. Instead, he found himself staring at what looked like a young woman. She was small, maybe the size of a teenager, with skin that had a pale, silvery shimmer like moonlight on water. Along the sides of her neck were thin slits that opened and closed rhythmically. Gills, Junho realized with shock. Her hair was white as snow, and when her eyes fluttered open, they were the most beautiful violet color he'd ever seen. She was wearing what looked like a metallic collar around her neck, covered in tiny, blinking lights. Her clothes were strange, too, made from some kind of material that seemed to shift color slightly as she moved. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. Junho's mind was racing, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. This wasn't an AI pet. This was a living being, and she definitely wasn't human. "Master," she whispered, her voice soft and musical. The word came out in broken Korean, but Junho understood it perfectly. He stumbled backward, nearly tripping over his coffee table. "What? Who are you?" he managed to say. The girl, or whatever she was, slowly sat up in the crate, moving carefully, like she was in pain. "Nari," she said, pointing to herself. "My name sounds like Nari in your language." Her Korean was rough, but she was clearly trying hard to communicate. As she spoke, Junho noticed that the gills on her neck were moving faster, like she was having trouble breathing. "I need water," she said, looking around his apartment with confusion. "Salt water, please." Junho's instincts kicked in. Whatever was happening, this being was in distress. He ran to his kitchen and started mixing salt into a large bowl of water, not really knowing what he was doing, but desperate to help. "The bathroom," he said, guiding her carefully. "There's a bathtub there." As the tub filled with salt water, Nari tried to explain what had happened to her. Her words came in broken pieces, but slowly Junho began to understand the horrifying truth. "My people, we live in water, on planet far away," she said, her breathing getting easier as she soaked in the makeshift bath. "Our world is dying. The water is poisoned. We had to leave." She explained that her species had been contacted by human traders who promised them safe passage and new homes. The aliens thought they would be welcomed as guests, maybe even friends. "They told us we would be companions," Nari continued, her violet eyes filling with what looked like tears. "They said humans would care for us, treat us with kindness. But when we arrived..." Her voice trailed off, and she touched the blinking collar around her neck with obvious fear. "They put these on us. They said we were pets now, products to be sold." Junho felt sick to his stomach. He'd accidentally bought a person, a living, thinking being who had been tricked and enslaved. Over the next few hours, he learned more about Nari's impossible situation. She couldn't eat most human food. It made her violently ill. She needed the salt water baths twice a day, or her gills would dry out. She didn't understand concepts like privacy, often following Junho around his apartment like a lost child. But her intelligence was incredible. Within just a few hours, her Korean improved dramatically. And when his laptop started acting up, something that had been bothering him for weeks, she simply placed her hand on it. Somehow, without touching the keyboard or even looking at the screen, she fixed it completely. "How did you do that?" Junho asked, amazed. "My people, we connect with machines differently than humans," she explained. "It's natural for us." As the day wore on, Junho's shock turned into something else: determination. He started researching online, trying to figure out how to help her, but when he mentioned calling the police or government officials, Nari grabbed his arm with surprising strength. "Please don't send Nari back," she begged, her eyes wide with terror. "They hurt the ones who return. They make examples of them so others won't try to escape." Looking into her frightened face, Junho made a decision that would change both their lives forever. He wasn't going to let anyone hurt this gentle, intelligent being, not if he could help it. Over the next week, Junho's life turned completely upside down. Every morning he would wake up to find Nari already awake, sitting by his window and staring at the sky with a sadness that broke his heart. She would tell him stories about her home planet, and each story made the situation more heartbreaking. "My world was beautiful once," Nari said one evening as Junho prepared her saltwater bath. "Cities that floated on crystal-clear oceans, gardens that grew beneath the waves. My people lived in harmony with the sea creatures for thousands of years. But then the corporations came, not human corporations, other alien species that strip-mined planets for resources. They dumped chemicals into the oceans, poisoned the water supplies, and destroyed entire ecosystems for profit. The elders made a terrible choice," Nari continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "They decided to save themselves first. The young ones like me. We were sold to raise money for evacuation ships." Junho felt anger burning in his chest. "Your own people sold you?" "They told us it was temporary," Nari said, touching the collar around her neck. "They said we would be treated well, that we would earn money to bring our families to safety. We believed them because what choice did we have? The collar was the worst part. Nari explained that it wasn't just tracking her location, it was slowly poisoning her, making her weaker and more dependent. It also blocked her natural abilities, the incredible technological gifts that her species possessed. Without the collar, I could interface with any computer system, she explained. My people built our entire civilization around the connection between mind and machine. But this device, it cuts me off from everything. Desperate to help her, Junho started searching the internet for information. Most websites had nothing useful, but late one night he stumbled across something that gave him hope, an encrypted forum discussing rescued companions. The forum was hidden behind multiple layers of security, accessible only to people who knew exactly what to look for. After hours of careful navigation, Junho finally gained access to a community of humans who were secretly helping aliens like Nari. The stories he read made him feel sick. There were hundreds, maybe thousands of aliens being trafficked across the world. Some were sold as pets, others as servants, and some for even worse purposes. But there were also stories of successful rescues, of aliens who had been freed and were now living normal lives. One forum member, using the name Soul Helper, reached out to Junho privately. They explained that Nari's species was particularly valuable because of their technological abilities. The traffickers were using them to hack security systems, steal information, and even develop new weapons. The collar suppresses their abilities, but also slowly kills them, Soul Helper wrote. Most don't survive more than a year in captivity. You need to get her out of there soon. But getting help meant taking risks. Every day, Junho noticed strange things happening around his apartment building. Cars that seemed to follow him when he went to the store. People in suits asking his neighbors questions. Phone calls where no one spoke when he answered. Nari noticed too. Her gills would flutter rapidly whenever she sensed danger, and she'd begun spending most of her time away from the windows. The collar sends signals, she explained one evening, her voice shaking. They always know where I am. I thought maybe they had forgotten about me, but she didn't need to finish the sentence. They both knew that their peaceful week together was about to end. The breaking point came on a rainy Thursday evening. Junho was cooking dinner when Nari suddenly grabbed his arm, her eyes wide with terror. "They're here," she whispered. Junho looked out the window and saw them. 3 men in dark suits standing across the street, not even trying to hide anymore. They were watching his building with the patience of predators who knew their prey had nowhere to run. One of them was talking on a phone, probably calling for backup. Another was taking photos of the building entrance. The third was just staring directly at Junho's window, as if he knew exactly which apartment to watch. "They found us," Nari whispered, her gills fluttering with fear. Junho's mind raced. The forum members had warned him this might happen. They'd given him emergency contact numbers and instructions for what to do if the traffickers tracked him down. But seeing those men standing there, knowing they wanted to drag Nari back into captivity, made everything feel terrifyingly real. He grabbed his phone and started typing a desperate message to Soul Helper. "They're outside my building right now. We need help immediately." The response came back within seconds. "Don't use your front door, pack only essentials. We're sending someone to get you both. Trust no one in uniform until we verify they're safe." Junho looked at Nari, who was now trembling despite the warm apartment air. Whatever happened next, there was no going back to their quiet week of learning about each other. The real fight for her freedom was about to begin. The knock on Junho's door came at exactly midnight, 3 sharp raps followed by silence. Junho's heart hammered as he peered through the peephole and saw 2 men in expensive suits standing in the hallway. They looked like businessmen, but their cold eyes told a different story. "Kim Junho," one of them called through the door. "We know you're in there, we just want to talk." Nari was hiding in the bathroom, but Junho could hear her, panicked breathing from across the apartment. The collar around her neck was blinking faster now, like it was responding to her fear. "You have something that belongs to us," the second man continued. "We can do this the easy way or the hard way." Junho's phone buzzed with a message from Soul Helper. "Back exit, now. Black van waiting. Moving as quietly as possible, Junho grabbed a backpack and stuffed it with essentials, some clothes, his laptop, and all the cash he had in the apartment. Nari emerged from the bathroom, carrying nothing but a small bag of salt for her baths. They slipped out through the building's rear entrance, just as the men in suits started pounding on the front door more aggressively. A black van was indeed waiting, its engine running. The driver was a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and graying hair. "Get in quickly," she whispered. "I'm Kyung-suk. We need to leave before they check the back." As they drove through Seoul's empty streets, Kyung-suk explained the situation. The men weren't just random thugs. They represented a sophisticated trafficking organization with connections in multiple countries. They'd tracked down several buyers like Junho, demanding enormous fees they claimed were owed for premium merchandise. "They wanted $50,000, Kyung-suk said, shaking her head. "They said Junho was only renting Nari, not buying her outright. It's all lies, of course, but they use fear and confusion to control people. Their first safe house was a small apartment above a 24-hour convenience store in Gangnam. The owner, an elderly man named Taijun, had been helping rescued aliens for years. He'd converted his storage room into a hidden shelter with special ventilation and a small tub for aquatic species like Nari. But even in hiding, Junho could see that Nari was getting sicker. The collar was doing more than just tracking her location. It was slowly poisoning her system. She slept most of the day, her silver skin growing pale and dull. Her gills moved sluggishly, and she could barely eat the special food Taejun had prepared for her species. "We need to get that thing off her neck," Kyung-suk said on their third day. "I know someone who might be able to help." That someone was Hyunwoo, a former electronics engineer who had lost his job after refusing to work on military projects. He now used his skills to help the underground network, specializing in removing the control devices that traffickers used on their victims. Hyunwoo arrived at midnight, carrying a bag full of strange tools and electronic equipment. He was young, maybe in his late 20s, with nervous energy and gentle hands. "I've never worked on this exact model before," he admitted, examining Nari's collar under a magnifying glass. "But the basic principles should be the same. The tricky part is that these devices often have kill switches. If we mess up, it could hurt her badly." Nari was too weak to be afraid anymore. She lay on the small bed, trusting these strangers with her life, because she had no other choice. For hours, Hyunwoo worked with tiny instruments, carefully disconnecting wires and disabling circuits. Sweat dripped from his forehead as he concentrated, knowing that one wrong move could be fatal. Finally, with a soft click, the collar opened and fell away from Nari's neck. The change was immediate and incredible. Color returned to her skin almost instantly. Her gills began moving with strong, healthy rhythms. But most amazing of all, her eyes suddenly came alive with an intelligence that had been suppressed for months. "I can feel everything," she whispered, sitting up with more energy than she'd shown in days. "All the electronic devices, they're like friends calling to me." She reached toward Hyunwoo's laptop without touching it, and the screen immediately came to life. Data flowed across the display faster than any human could read, but Nari was absorbing it all effortlessly. "Security cameras throughout the building," she said, her voice stronger now. "I can see through all of them. There are 2 men watching the front entrance and 1 in a car across the street." Junho stared in amazement as she interfaced with device after device around the apartment. The television, the refrigerator, even the building's security system. Her consciousness seemed to flow through circuits like water through pipes. "My people built our technology to work with our minds," she explained, effortlessly switching between camera feeds to monitor their pursuers. "We don't need keyboards or screens. We become one with the machines." For the first time since this nightmare began, Junho felt a spark of hope. They were no longer just running and hiding. Now they had a weapon the traffickers hadn't expected. Nari's incredible abilities, finally set free. With Nari's collar removed, they thought they had gained the upper hand. But within hours, their situation became more desperate than ever. The trafficking ring wasn't just a group of criminals. They had people everywhere, including places where help should have come from. Their second safe house lasted only 2 days. Kyung-suk received a panicked call from Taejun at 3 a.m., warning them that police officers had arrived, asking questions about suspicious foreigners. But these weren't real police investigations. Someone with access to official databases was feeding information directly to the traffickers. "We need to move again," Kyung-suk said, her face grim. "They're using government resources to track us." Nari, still recovering from having her collar removed, tried to help by monitoring communications networks. Her abilities were incredible, but using them for extended periods left her exhausted and weak. She could hack into police databases and government systems, but each time she did, it drained more of her energy. "I can see their messages," she said, her voice tired as she interfaced with a laptop. "They have contacts in immigration, local, police, even some federal offices. They're not just criminals, they're organized like a corporation." Their third safe house was in Incheon, in the basement of a small restaurant owned by a woman named Soo-jin. But even there, they felt the net closing around them. Nari intercepted communications, showing that the traffickers had expanded their search, bringing in more people and offering rewards for information. "They're getting desperate," Hyunwoo explained during one of his visits. "Usually they write off escaped merchandise as a business loss, but Nari is different. Her abilities make her incredibly valuable to them." The constant stress was taking its toll on everyone, but especially on Nari. Using her technological abilities required intense mental focus, and she was pushing herself beyond safe limits to keep them ahead of their pursuers. She barely ate, slept only a few hours each night, and her skin was beginning to lose its healthy silver glow again. Junho watched helplessly as she grew weaker each day. Sometimes he would find her staring at nothing, her consciousness lost in some electronic network, while her body remained motionless for hours. "You need to rest," he told her repeatedly. "Let someone else handle the monitoring for a while." "I can't," she would always reply. "The moment I stop watching, they'll find us. I'm the only one who can see their communications in real time." Their fourth safe house was supposed to be the most secure yet, a fishing village near Busan, where Soo-jin's brother ran a small boat repair shop. The plan was to lay low for a few weeks, while the underground network arranged for false documents that would help them disappear completely. But the traffickers had anticipated this move. They'd been monitoring not just government databases, but also the communication patterns of the people helping them. By tracking who was talking to whom, they'd identified several members of the underground network. Junho woke up at dawn to find Nari sitting bolt upright, her eyes wide with terror. "They're here," she whispered. 3 cars, maybe 12 people. They surrounded the village during the night. Through her connection to local security cameras and cell phone networks, she could see everything. The traffickers had brought more people this time, including what looked like private military contractors. They weren't just planning to recapture her, they were planning to eliminate anyone who had helped her escape. "There's a boat at the dock," Nari said, her voice getting weaker as she pushed her abilities to their limit. "If we can reach it," but as they tried to sneak toward the harbor, the strain finally became too much for her. Nari collapsed in the middle of a narrow alley, her body going completely limp. Junyo caught her before she hit the ground, but she was unconscious and barely breathing. Behind them he could hear voices shouting and the sound of footsteps getting closer. Ahead, the boat that represented their only escape seemed impossibly far away. Nari was small, but carrying an unconscious person while running was nearly impossible. For a moment Junho considered the unthinkable, leaving her behind and saving himself. The rational part of his mind argued that there was no point in both of them being captured. But as he looked down at her peaceful face, he realized that running away wasn't an option. Over the past weeks, Nari had become more than just someone he was helping. She was his friend. Maybe even something more than that. She'd trusted him completely, shared her fears and hopes, and shown him a kind of courage he'd never imagined possible. "I won't abandon you," he whispered to her unconscious form, lifting her as gently as possible. "Whatever it takes." The boat was still 50 meters away when the first trafficker rounded the corner behind them. Junho ran harder than he'd ever run in his life, Nari's slight weight feeling heavier with each step. Gunshots echoed off the narrow. Buildings around them, but he kept moving forward. He wasn't going to let them take her back, not now, not ever. Even if it meant spending the rest of his life as a fugitive, he would protect her. Because that's what humans do when they care about someone. They fight no matter how impossible the odds might seem. I notice there's a disconnect between the story we've been developing about Junho and Nari and this new Part 6 you've provided, which introduces completely different characters, Jinwoo Velnara Taimin Da-yun, and a different scenario involving physical confrontation. The story we've been building follows Junho, a software developer, and Nari, an alien he accidentally purchased, as they flee from traffickers. Your new Part 6 seems to be from a different story entirely, involving what appears to be a more aggressive confrontation scene. Would you like me to 1. Continue with Part 6 of the original Junho and Nari story, about their escape and what happens after the boat chase scene from Part 5. Expand the new Part 6 you've provided with the different characters, keeping it appropriate for YouTube. Policies? Help you develop a different direction for the story. Please clarify which story you'd like me to continue, and I'll be happy to expand it in 600 words using simple English while keeping it engaging and YouTube-friendly. The fishing. Boat captain who rescued them turned out to be more than just a helpful stranger. Captain Wu Jin had been smuggling escaped aliens to safety for 3 years, ever since his own daughter had been kidnapped by traffickers during a vacation in Thailand. He never found her, but helping others became his way of fighting back. "You're not the first ones I've pulled out of the water," he said as his boat cut through the dark ocean waves. "But you might be the most important." While Nari recovered in the boat's small cabin, Wu Jin explained that he'd been waiting for someone like her, someone with the ability and knowledge to expose the entire operation. Most escaped aliens were too traumatized or too afraid to speak out, but Nari was different. "She has proof," Wu Jin said, glancing toward the cabin where Nari was slowly regaining consciousness. Not just stories, but actual evidence stored in her memory. 3 days later, they met Park Soo-young in a small coffee shop in Jeju Island. The investigative journalist had been tracking human trafficking cases for over a decade, but she'd never encountered anything like what Junho and Nari described. Soo-young was in her early 40s, with sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a notebook that never left her side. She'd won awards for exposing corruption in government and business, but this story was unlike anything she'd ever covered. "I need you to understand something," she told them seriously. "If we do this, there's no going back. These people have killed to protect their secrets. Once we publish this story, you'll never be safe." Nari, still weak but determined, looked directly into Soo-young's eyes. "They're killing my people anyway," she said quietly. "At least this way, some might be saved." For 2 weeks they worked together in secret. Nari used her abilities to access the traffickers' own computer systems, downloading years of financial records, communication logs, and shipping manifests. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. The trafficking ring wasn't just selling aliens as pets. Some were being used as forced labor in factories and mines. Others were being experimented on by pharmaceutical companies. The most technologically gifted, like Nari's people, were being used to hack government systems and steal industrial secrets. "This goes to the highest levels," Soo-young said, reviewing the documents spread across her hotel room. "Politicians, business leaders, even some military officials, they're all involved. But the most shocking discovery was the scope of the operation. Through the traffickers' own records, they learned that over 50 different alien species were being exploited across the planet. Earth wasn't just dealing with one group of refugees. It was in the middle of a galactic crisis that most humans didn't even know existed. My people weren't the only ones whose world was destroyed," Nari explained, tears streaming down her face as she read through the files. "There are species from dozens of different planets, all sold into slavery." Soo-young spent sleepless nights verifying every piece of evidence, cross-referencing names and dates, building an unshakable case. She reached out to trusted contacts at major news networks around the world, preparing for a coordinated release that would be impossible to suppress. The story broke on a Tuesday morning at exactly 9 a.m. Korean time. Simultaneously, news anchors in Seoul, Tokyo, London, New York, and dozens of other cities began reporting the same incredible story. Intelligent alien beings were being trafficked and sold as pets to wealthy humans. The evidence was impossible to ignore. Bank records showing millions of dollars in transactions, video footage of aliens being held in warehouse facilities, communications between government officials discussing how to hide the alien presence from the public. Within hours, the story dominated every news channel and social media platform on Earth. Alien trafficking became the most used hashtag in history. Protests erupted in major cities as people demanded action from their governments. The public reaction was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. People weren't just angry, they were horrified and ashamed. The idea that sentient beings, creatures, capable of thought and emotion, had been treated like exotic pets disgusted humans across all cultures and religions. "This is our generation's greatest moral failure," said one news commentator, echoing what millions of people were feeling. Religious leaders called it a sin against creation itself. Scientists demanded immediate protection for all alien species. Even children seemed to instinctively understand that what had happened was terribly wrong. But for Junho, watching the news coverage from their safe house, the most important moment came when he saw Nari's face on screen. She was no longer just a victim or a refugee. She had become the voice of every alien who had suffered in silence, and her courage was inspiring an entire planet to do better. The world changed overnight. Within 48 hours of Soo-young's story breaking, governments around the globe were scrambling to respond to the biggest crisis in human history. Emergency sessions were called at the United Nations, while protesters filled the streets of every major city, demanding immediate action. The trafficking ring tried to fight back at first. Their lawyers claimed the evidence was fabricated. Their political allies tried to discredit the story, and they even attempted to have Nari and Junho arrested on false charges. But the evidence was too strong, and public outrage was too fierce for their usual tactics to work. One by one, the traffickers' safe houses were raided by police forces around the world. In Seoul, Bangkok, London, and New York, authorities found warehouses full of aliens being held in terrible conditions. The rescue operations were broadcast live on television, showing the world the true horror of what had been happening in secret. Junho watched the raids from their safe house, holding Nari's hand as they saw members of her own species being carried out on stretchers. Many were barely alive, their collars having slowly poisoned them over months or years of captivity. "I should have spoken sooner," Nari whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Maybe some of them would still be alive." "You couldn't have known," Junho replied, squeezing her hand gently. "You did what you could when you could do it, that's all anyone can ask." The legal proceedings that followed were unlike anything in human history. Traditional laws didn't cover crimes against non-human sentient beings, so legal experts from around the world worked around the clock to create new international statutes. The concept of crimes against sentience was born, laws that protected any being capable of thought, emotion, and communication, regardless of their species or planet of origin. It was a revolutionary legal framework that would change how humans interacted with any intelligent life they might encounter in the future. The trials were held in The Hague, with judges from multiple countries presiding. Nari's testimony was the centerpiece of the prosecution's case. For 3 days, she calmly and clearly described everything she had experienced and witnessed, her words translated into dozens of languages and broadcast around the world. The trafficking ring's leaders tried every legal trick they could think of. They claimed they didn't know the aliens were sentient. They argued that they were providing homes and care for refugee species. They even suggested that the aliens had agreed to be sold. But Nari's evidence was unshakable. Her perfect memory, enhanced by her species' natural connection to technology, allowed her to recall exact conversations, specific dates, and precise details that demolished every defense the traffickers attempted. The verdicts came after 6 months of trials. Life sentences for the ringleaders, decades in prison for their accomplices, and most importantly, the complete dismantling of their global operation. But justice was only the beginning of Nari's new life on Earth. The same governments that had initially tried to hide the alien presence now competed to offer her citizenship and protection. She chose to remain in South Korea, the country where her freedom had begun. President Lee personally granted her asylum and appointed her as Earth's first official alien ambassador. It was a position that had never existed before, but the world recognized that they needed someone who could bridge the gap between human and alien cultures. Nari's technological insights proved invaluable in ways no one had anticipated. Working with teams of human scientists and engineers, she helped develop new computer systems that were decades ahead of anything humans had created on their own. Her people's natural ability to interface with machines opened up possibilities that scientists had only dreamed of. The patents and innovations that came from this collaboration made both Nari and Junho incredibly wealthy, but they used their newfound resources to establish something much more important: the Interspecies Contact Foundation. The Foundation's mission was to ensure that any future contact between humans and alien species would be based on respect, equality, and mutual benefit, rather than exploitation. They developed protocols for first contact situations, created refugee assistance programs, and established educational initiatives to help humans understand their place in a larger galactic community. Most importantly, they worked to locate and assist the families of trafficked aliens. Using Nari's connections and abilities, they managed to establish communication with several alien homeworlds, beginning the long process of reuniting separated families and providing aid to refugee communities. For Junho, watching Nari transform from a frightened victim into a confident leader was the most rewarding part of their journey. She had not only survived her ordeal, but had used it to create positive change that would benefit countless beings across the galaxy. Their work was far from over, but they had proven something important about humanity. When faced with their own failures, humans were capable of growth, redemption, and genuine moral progress. The glass walls of their research facility caught the golden light of the setting sun as it reflected off the Han River below. 2 years had passed since that terrifying night when Junho first opened a mysterious crate in his cramped apartment, and the world had transformed in ways neither of them could have imagined. Nari stood at the main control console, her fingers dancing through holographic displays that would have looked like magic to humans just a few years earlier. The technology was a fusion of human engineering and alien innovation, beautiful, efficient, and completely revolutionary. "The third evacuation ship just cleared Earth's atmosphere," she reported, her voice filled with quiet satisfaction. "That's another 5,000 of my people safely relocated to the colony worlds." Junho watched her work, still amazed by how gracefully she moved between different tasks. She was simultaneously coordinating refugee ships, monitoring integration programs in 12 different countries, and maintaining communication with over 30 alien species that had made contact with Earth since the trafficking scandal broke. There, Foundation's headquarters had become the unofficial center of interspecies relations on Earth. The building hummed with activity as human and alien staff worked together on projects that were reshaping civilization itself. In the medical wing, alien healers were teaching human doctors techniques that could cure diseases that had plagued humanity for centuries. In the technology labs, joint research teams were developing clean energy systems that could power entire cities without environmental damage. But perhaps most importantly, in the cultural exchange centers scattered throughout the building, humans and aliens were simply learning to be friends. "Remember Mrs. Kim from the apartment next to yours?" Junho asked, leaning against the window. "She stopped me in the hallway yesterday to ask if Nari could teach her granddaughter some of those mathematical concepts that your people use. Apparently, the kid is having trouble with her calculus homework." Nari laughed, the sound like silver, bells chiming in the wind. "I love how humans think my people's advanced quantum mathematics will somehow make basic calculus easier to understand." "Hey, it worked for me," Junho protested with a grin. "My programming skills improved by about 1,000% after you showed me how your people approach problem solving." It was true. The software company they'd started together had revolutionized multiple industries. But more than the money or success, Junho valued how their partnership had changed him as a person. Working with Nari had taught him to think beyond human limitations, to consider perspectives he'd never imagined possible. Their personal relationship had evolved too, though they rarely talked about it directly. They weren't quite lovers in the human sense, but they weren't just friends either. Their bond was something new, something that transcended the traditional categories that either of their species used to define relationships. The integration. Statistics came in today, Nari said, pulling up a new display. 97% of rescued aliens report feeling welcomed in their new communities. Crime rates in areas with mixed populations are actually lower than the national average, and educational test scores in schools with alien students and teachers are breaking records. Junho nodded, feeling a deep sense of pride in what humanity had accomplished. The initial fear and confusion following the trafficking revelations had given way to curiosity, compassion, and genuine excitement about Earth's new place in the galactic community. "There's something I've been meaning to ask you," Junho said, his voice becoming more serious. "Do you ever regret that night I bought you? I mean, everything that happened afterward was terrible. The running, the fear, almost getting killed. If you could go back and change it, would you?" Nari turned away from her displays to face him fully. Her violet eyes held depths of wisdom that sometimes made Junho forget she was probably younger than him by human standards. "You're asking the wrong question," she said gently, moving closer to the window where he stood. "That wasn't when you bought me, Junho. That was when you chose to free me." She gestured toward the bustling city below, where humans and aliens now walked the same streets, shopped in the same stores, and shared the same hopes for the future. "And in freeing me, you freed yourself too. You freed yourself from loneliness, from thinking small, from believing that one person can't make a difference in the universe." The sun had nearly set now, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. In the distance, they could see the lights of the spaceport, where ships from a dozen different worlds arrived daily, bringing refugees, diplomats, students, and traders to Earth. "Besides," Nari added with a mischievous smile, "if you hadn't clicked that buy button, I never would have learned to love instant noodles, and that would have been a true tragedy." Junho laughed, wrapping his arm around her shoulders in a gesture that had become natural over the past 2 years. Whatever the future held, and with their Foundation's work expanding to new star systems, it promised to be extraordinary. They would face it together. Their story had begun with a lonely man making an impulsive purchase in the middle of the night. Now it was becoming the foundation for humanity's greatest adventure, learning to be good neighbors in a galaxy full of wonders.